All right, so this will be our last video of chapter 13 here, looking at pedigrees of sex-linked genes. Again, males have the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. Females have two X chromosomes. Typically, traits are passed down on the X chromosome. So females that are heterozygous are carriers. In order for females to have the disease, they have to be homozygous recessive. But males only have one X chromosome, so whatever they inherit is what they express. Color blindness is a good example. If you can see this 7, you are not red-green colorblind, at least not to this degree. If you can't see that 7 in there, you may want to get checked for color blindness. Okay, 6% of the population here, most of them being males. So for a male to be colorblind, okay, all they need is that one recessive allele on the X chromosome. To have normal vision, they have to have the dominant allele. For females to be colorblind, they have to be homozygous recessive. If they've got at least one dominant allele for colorblindness, they're totally fine and have normal vision. But this heterozygous individual would be referred to as a carrier. So hemophilia is a disease that's inherited on the X chromosome. We did a Punnett square with this in our practice. But we see here that we've got a bunch of individuals that are heterozygous, passing on that X chromosome with hemophilia from daughter to daughter to daughter. But they're totally fine because they're carriers. They've got that other X chromosome with the normal allele. But when Alexandra had the son Alexis, she passed on that X chromosome with the recessive allele for hemophilia to him. And so he had hemophilia and his blood wasn't able to clot correctly. And it's a disease where simple injuries could end up leading to you bleeding out. And so here we see this whole map of hemophilia. And this was rather common in royal families because they interbred a lot. And so here we've got the passing down of these alleles. Here we see Mary, Queen of Scots, actually had hemophilia, which is relatively uncommon for females because they have to have two recessive alleles for this to be possible. Okay, and so we can see this tracking here, and you see all these bizarre lines and stuff. It's because all that weird interbreeding and stuff that they did with cousins and whatnot. So we have this hemophilia pedigree. Okay, here we're looking at a father with hemophilia. So he's got that recessive trait on his X chromosome. Mother's not a carrier, so she's normal. So any of their children are all going to receive an X chromosome from mom. And so they're all going to be normal because they get that dominant allele. Now, we see down here another male with a disease. So this female has to be a carrier, right? Because mom gave the normal dominant allele, but dad can only pass on the hemophilia allele to his daughters. So 5 here is a carrier, 2 here, also a carrier. And so this daughter, when she had children, passed on that recessive allele to this son, and he also had hemophilia. Okay, and so this daughter over here, 5, also has a chance of passing on hemophilia to her sons because she's a carrier as well. Okay, and so what type of pattern of inheritance is this? Okay, we've got our various genotypes where we can be homozygous dominant, heterozygous. And so this is not looking at a sex-linked trait. This is just looking at a normal inheritance here. Okay. And so what are the genotypes of I1 and 2? Well, we look at these individuals and they had a child with that recessive phenotype. So they both have to be heterozygous. Okay. 2-1, this individual, they have to be homozygous recessive to display this specific trait. If 2-5 and 2-6, these individuals have a child, what are the chances that child has Tay-Sachs? Well, we see that they have a child that has the disorder, so they both must be heterozygous. So you do your typical Punnett square with two heterozygous individuals, and we see that we get a 25% or 1 in 4 chance that they have a child with Tay-Sachs disease. Okay, and so that's the general way that we interpret pedigrees. Is you get a lot of information when you see individuals that express recessive traits. And then you can go beyond that. You can figure out what their parents were, which can give you an idea of their siblings and so on. Okay. So we've got another example here of squirrels. Okay, and we can look at this. Gray squirrel, big G is dominant. Black squirrel, recessive. If you're ever on the Council Bluffs campus at Iowa Western, you see we've got a lot of black squirrels on campus, which carry this recessive allele. Okay, and so here, let's say a black squirrel, the colored in is our black squirrels. And so genotypes of generation 1, well, we've got little g. This one we know has at least one big G. In order to figure out what its other allele is, we have to look at their children. And so we see individuals that are black squirrels. So this individual also has to have a recessive allele. So squirrel 2 here in generation 1, heterozygous. Genotypes of 2-1 and 2-3. Well, 2-1, we've got a dominant allele. So we've got a big G. It's got a parent that is homozygous recessive. So all that this parent can pass on are recessive alleles. So this individual is going to be big G, little g, heterozygous. 2-3 here, homozygous recessive, right? It's a black squirrel, so it has to have 2 little g's. Okay. Genotype of 4-3. Okay. We've got a parent here that can only pass on the recessive allele, but they don't display it. They must be heterozygous. Okay. And so that is looking at pedigrees. Okay. And that is the end of chapter 13. If you haven't looked at the Punnett square practice, make sure you do that so that you know how to do those types of problems.